Having our own rock music never gets old. Welcome to Generation Movies on a Wednesday night. My name is JW Colwell. I am joined, as always, by the effervescent movie lover himself, Rich Drees of FILMBUFF Online. Rich, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm barely home from the Philadelphia Film Festival, which wrapped up this weekend. Still got a couple of reviews I want to write and get out quickly. I might hold on to one or two other things for later on.
How was your trick-or-treating? How was your Halloween?
Find
as I'm getting... I've been doing the candy handing out thing recently. I find it really appealing. Like, it just... The idea, because I feel like we're in this trunk or treat era, and I don't like the trunk or treat era. I like the idea of like having a light on and decorations up and kids coming to the door and you're sitting there and you know what I mean. And it's down here, it's nice. It was like 80. So
I mean, there were some trick or treaters I think in my neighborhood. However, I'm in a building that's like basically 6 apartments, and the front door is, you kind of have to have the key to get in. So
yeah, that's rough. Well, I'm longing a little bit. Like, I guess my wife and my cousin's husband took the nephews to this, to a really nice place that had a bunch of people and stuff. And I'm jonesing to get back to that nice Halloween. Because I remember when I was a kid in NEPA, it was like you could go the whole vast streets and neighborhoods and end up with like a bag the size of like a shopping bag. You know what I mean? Like, but I also have the movie traditions. I do like Halloween at midnight. I added Halloween 2 this year because I recently got it, and it's nice. It was a good transfer. I find Halloween 2 to be very pleasant. Like in a completely like, I don't know what the hell's gonna happen sort of way. Why are we doing this in a hospital? But we are going to do something tonight. We're going to extend Halloween a little further. We have...
It's like Christmas. You always keep Halloween in your heart all year round.
Yeah, and it's better than talking about Mariah Carey. So, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, Rich. I will say, I love the poster. I love that the demon on the poster has nothing to do with the poster. I also think the tagline is actually very cool because it ties into the tagline from the other Halloween movies. The night he came home, the night no one comes home. That's great.
That's a bit of marketing that does a lot of heavy lifting, I think, for this movie.
But it actually, I was thinking about it, right? So in the grand scheme of things, that marketing, that wonderful tagline, actually ties it to Halloween 1 and Halloween 2.
True.
And which is the biggest problem with the movie, right? The biggest problem with the movie, for whatever reason, is this ongoing fascination with the hatred for this movie because it doesn't have this guy. I wore the shirt specifically so we could talk about the problems with Halloween 3, and it is basically there are no butcher knives and no Micheal Myers. Now you can't say there's no Jamie Lee Curtis because there is. We're going to get to that.
We'll get there. First. Let's throw out the love for the rest of the Indie Network folks. Indie Escape Network.
Oh God, yes. I'm sorry. Jesus, I'm at a loss. It's Halloween week, so we got a lot of great people on this network. Tim Milliken has been doing these wonderful full cast shows of great cult movies. You got Brandon Brooks, who's having a big week. His movie just dropped at the Philadelphia Film Festival. Congratulations to him. He runs a great show.
I was sitting in the main venue for the film festival on closing night as they were announcing all the awards, the audience awards and stuff, and to hear his film get the honorable mention for local feature, locally produced Philadelphia area.
Yeah, congratulations to Brandon and everybody on Not for Nothing for bringing a little taste of Philly to the filmdom. We also have Gabe, who does incredible interviews on Tuesday nights, and we have CJ with Manic Mondays on Monday. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and also if you have the Facebook, is it the Facebook or it's just Facebook? But it could be, it could have been the Facebook if it was, if if things had gone differently. But we also have a Facebook page on the Indie Escape Network. A lot of talented folks, including Joe Ridgely and David Madison on Sunday nights, and we're very lucky to be part of the thing. Ken says, "Good evening, friends."
And Joe also does all the graphics each week that you and I both post onto our socials.
We take him for granted. We take Joe for granted.
He does some great work there.
Yeah. Good evening, Joe. Good evening, gentlemen. Happy belated Halloween, Rich. Did you get to view Not for Nothing? He did not.
No.
I will say, I'll speak for Rich here. He had a very busy, packed, loaded week.
And that's not counting, my car breaking down on me, the
we went over it last week.
It
was a little crazy.
The tooth I chipped on a kernel of popcorn.
Yeah,
which is an occupational hazard.
It was bound to happen. Yes. Halloween never ends, according to Ken. And yes, we're gonna get into that tonight. Halloween doesn't end. It's actually been a really good last couple of weeks for Halloween related materials. It's been a Cabinet of Curiosities on Netflix has really tickled my fancy. Barbarian on HBO Max really tickled my fancy. So
the Terrifier 2 has come out of nowhere to dominate at the box office.
$8 million, Rich.
Yeah,
$8 million.
What did they
only cost $250 to make. 250,000.
That's
Well, then actually, the last three movies get released. Yeah, well, it's ridiculous. I was talking about it earlier tonight on Loud and Nerdy. Terrifier 2 is getting into it's not into Paranormal Activity or Blair Witch range, but only because those movies got a much wider release and had champions other than this is all ground source up, people loving the first one and going out of their way to make sure. And we friends of the network are definitely involved in it. Great kudos to them for $8 million at the box office when you haven't spent a lot of money on marketing and haven't spent a lot of money on whatever. Did you also hear that this week Bloody Disgusting, who has produced the film, has made it available and is campaigning for Oscar votes as well?
Yes, I have. That's
well, and here's the thing: why wouldn't it be up for a makeup award or visual effects or if you're making people throw up in theaters, you might be doing something right. So I wish them the best. But it's a golden age right now. There's a really Barbarian did really well on a small budget. Smile did exceptionally well on a small budget.
I'm excited that it looks like, at least for the last month or so, because of the season, horror has been doing well at the box office. Yeah, especially low budget horror. People will come out for that. I wish studios were putting other types of low and mid-range budget movies out in the theaters as well.
And I think
Ticket to Paradise was good. I enjoyed that, and I wish more people would come out for that. I'd like to see.
It did okay. It did really well around the world. It's one of the weird. But like I said, the other main problem going right now is you just reviewed one of the things you're working on reviewing is the Weird Al Yankovic movie, right?
My review's already dropped on that.
Great comedy. We can't get a comedy to kill ourselves in a theater. And the two things that I always thought were, aside from blockbusters, which are obviously, everybody goes to movies theaters to see them. Comedies and horror films are very much in line with, they're meant to be enjoyed with an audience. You're meant to laugh at certain things. You might laugh harder if somebody's laughing at something. You might get in on the joke.
Yeah, and I kind of hit upon this in my review of Weird, the Al Yankovic story, that it's a damn shame that this is just going outside of a couple of festival showings like at Toronto and Philly, and I think it had one, maybe two others showings, that this thing's going right to the Roku channel. And, okay, it's cool if you're sitting at home with a couple of friends, your family, you order in some pizzas, have beverage of your choice. You're going to enjoy the movie. You're all going to laugh and have a good time. But if you're in a theater, man, with 150, 200, 300 other people,
like-minded people,
That kind of
Yeah, it's a
stuff
weird.
fun and the wonderfulness of it.
Well, I
And
was.
it sucks that people aren't going to have that
Well,
same wonderful
I was of
thing that
vibe. Yeah. Well, horror seems to be the ones that where people are going out to actively. Where I was also talking to somebody about, and I was talking to you before the show. The Christmas Story Christmas trailer dropped, and somebody said, "I hope they release the theaters." And I'm like, "Well, the problem with that is the original didn't do that great in theaters." And then I hit upon you and I were talking. It's been an epiphany. Christmas Story is kind of like the first streaming movie. It's streamed for a long time. It's streamed for 48 hours straight every Christmas on CBS or TNT. And it's like the first place where you could watch something over and over and over and over again in an allotted period of time. So
you could tune in, tune out, pop in whenever you want.
I had a wonderful way of watching to a certain point, leaving, visiting family, coming back, sitting down, and inadvertently coming in at exactly the moment I left. Which is how every great movie should be. But not every movie is great, and not every movie is a sequel that is worthy or a sequel that gets burdened by its past sequels, right? And this is what we're talking about. The stories, like you and I go in every week, we do a deep dive, we rummage through all the stories, sift, kind of looking for gold. The shit behind Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen. Like, just stuff I didn't know about and stuff that I think, like, I never thought we were going to have a conversation tonight. We're going to right now, right now, at this moment, about where Quartermass and 50s sci-fi London BBC television has anything to do with Halloween 3. How a guy might also not really like Irish people that much and decide to make them villains in a sequel to a Michael Myers movie without Michael Myers.
True. Now, I want to start off by saying I'm not a big slasher guy. Just not my cup of tea, really. But if you love it, more power to you.
Love it.
So,
can't get enough.
This, I can see where, the third installment of the Halloween franchise, where it kind of goes back to John Carpenter's original idea of it being in an anthology movie series with a different type of scary Halloween story. I like that idea, and I think that it's interesting, that after he does Halloween and Mike Myers becomes the big hit, and he's kind of forced into doing the sequel. So he's like
at gunpoint to do Halloween 2.
So he finally says, you know what? For the third one, we're going to have somebody write a new story. We're going to get rid of Michael Myers. We're not going to deal with Laurie Strode or Loomis or any of that. And we're just going to do, what my original idea was. I think that's great. I still think the idea of like a branded anthology franchise of spooky movies and one every year or so comes out at Halloween time is a great way to, even just develop new directors and new writers for the genre. And
they would be nuts not to actually take Carpenter up on it now. Just saying.
I'm approaching this as a guy who has no innate inner love for I don't want to say inner love. I don't have inner love for Michael Myers. I'm not a fan, so I wasn't expecting the third film of this franchise to once again be Michael Myers and then act like very upset that it wasn't. All of that kind of fandom baggage I'm setting aside. I'm just looking at this as a movie in and of itself.
So I'm going to take the opposite approach. Okay, I started out as the fan that pissed and moaned and complained, how can you have a Halloween movie without Michael Myers? And then especially because, and again, whether you believe it or not, Halloween, probably greatest slasher film ever made. Halloween 2, a very viable sequel that is a lot of fans, has a lot of scary sequences, is well done, is in a hospital, terrifying, and has a lot of fans. And then Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, also has a series of fans and it's a very well established now. Now, when we get into 5 and 6, and we get new timelines and we get cults, thorn cults, that's where things get messy until 2018, and then 2018 is great. But then I don't know that we needed the other two. But what I will say is, I came to Halloween 3: Season of the Witch as a kid in love with Michael Myers, in love with the Loomis character, in love with Laurie Strode. Watching it every Halloween with my dad and being scared out of my minds, and how do you stop him? I remember playing games as a kid where I was Loomis and one of my friends was Michael Myers, running around apartment complexes in Monticello, New York. I remember it vividly. So I was a huge fan. So when I came in Halloween 3: Season of the Witch, I had the opposite approach to you. I came in going, where the fuck is Michael? What is going on here? And why is Stonehenge in my movie? And so, but what I will say is I had an epiphany, Rich. And about 15 years ago, if you strip the Halloween name off of it, if you just sit back and you go, hey, this isn't too bad, where you can just look at it and go, it's on its own a weird, wonky 80s horror film, right? I feel this is one of the reasons it failed. It fails because the poster has the tagline. It fails because everybody walked in going, where is my guy? Where's the boogeyman?
It failed because the audience had expectations that the filmmakers themselves had absolutely no interest in whatsoever.
Well, and that's where it gets
thing, and
that's where it gets really interesting. Like, you read the backstory on this. I think the person that I want to make sure I get the name. I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm going to make sure we get it right. I'm assuming that I'm assuming it's just Nigel Neal, but it's spelled Kaneale. I assume it's just Neal. But this gentleman, is a Manx screenwriter. He was a BAFTA award-winning British screenplay winner. He is very famous on British television for coming up with Quartermass Experiment, which is a very famous sci-fi show from the 50s.
Which he redone a few times, including, I think, most recently in about 2005 or 6, they did a live 2-hour version of it on the BBC with David Tennant and a bunch of other people, and that was fantastic.
But he gets roped into this in 1981, where he gets talked to do it. He's working with John Landis, and they're working on a remake for Creature from the Black Lagoon. And he's working in Hollywood with his wife, and they do the Black Lagoon script. It doesn't work out. He meets, in the meantime, Joe Dante. Landis and Dante and Carpenter all kind of sitting around is my version of heaven, I would imagine. Like, just crazy horror minds sitting around a table just talking about stuff. And they invite him to do the script for that third Halloween movie. Great. He, however, balks at it and says, look, I heard the first 2 movies are terrible. I want nothing to do with it. I'm better than this. And they're like, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's not going to have anything to do with Michael Myers. So he comes in, he writes a script. John Carpenter approves the script. And he did it quicker than he was supposed to do it. I think they wanted him to do it in 6 weeks. He had it done in like 3. And then he develops a relationship with Tommy Lee Wallace, who's the director, right? And then Dino De Laurentiis steps in and fucks it up.
Dino De Laurentiis fucking something up.
Yeah. He comes in, he adds more graphic violence, and it eventually comes to the place that Neal becomes so displeased that in the background he pulls his name off the screenplay, Rich.
Yep.
And now, it's fascinating. Incredibly fascinating.
I went looking for in the various script trading groups and stuff that I sometimes habituate in the on the internet, and I went looking to see if anybody had a copy of any
the original.
of the draft.
Yeah.
that Neil had written. And even like some hardcore Neo collectors are like, there's only a couple of copies in existence, and the people who have those are not trading them, they're not scanning them, they're not letting them out. And that kind of bummed me out because, I'm always afraid that, some collector who's hoarding an interesting and important document like that, they're going to die and their relatives aren't going to know what to do. They're not going to recognize the historical value of that. And they're going to wind up just tossing it. And then that's lost. That's just lost to film history. And that's the kind of thing that just gives me nightmares.
Yeah, this script had to be a banger. Like it had no.
I really want to read it.
Just some of the stuff. Well, first off, a lot of the stuff makes it into the movie, right?
Mhm.
First thing first, a lot of the stuff makes it into the movie, which includes Stonehenge, cultists, hatred of Irish people. A lot of it makes it into the movie, but there's a whole subplot about the girl.
Mhm.
I was reading. Did you read anything about that? About the little girl?
No, but I did want to spend, also in the script, you have like almost like these elder gods. It's very, Lovecraftian Cthulhu kind of a thing.
Cabin in the woods ish, dare I say.
And yeah, I would not be surprised if this was a direct, it had a direct impact on the making of Cabin in the Woods. Also, it's very English folk horror on a certain level as well, because
yes.
you have your villain talking about the last time we did this 4,000 years ago. We were sacrificing children and the hills ran red with blood, or something to that effect. And
Daniel Hurley given that one line is one of the greatest things ever.
He is so much better than the rest of this. but
there are a bunch of pieces that are better
in there, because I don't think we saw a lot of that in American film. I mean, we already The Wicker Man had already come out, but that was a British film, and you saw a lot of folk horror and a lot of the Amicus stuff, some later Hammer films, things like that. But this is like the first time, to my reckoning, that we've really seen any kind of like that British folk horror influence on an American film.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was reading one of the concepts in the original screenplay was the girl character. She was abused by her father. The father at the beginning, who was like stealing the mask and gets murdered early and gets murdered in the hospital, and then guy sets himself on fire, all that stuff. But her dad had abused her as a child, and in the original script, Daniel Hurley's Connell Coughlin, or whatever the hell his name is, changes her into a little girl. And so the only way Tom Atkins character knows that she is the character is because she tells a story about her father, and she got beat by her father because she released a bird, and that was a gift. It was a very special bird, and that's the end. The end of the movie was actually her dropping all the pieces onto the ground as if to release the birds and kill the guys at the end. It ends up being Tom Atkins in the revised script. But the only reason he knows she's the little girl is because she's told the story throughout the entire movie. So it's like a psychological horror. It's not nearly as gory. It doesn't have any crazy robot shit.
I have a problem with the crazy robot shit towards the end. We'll get to that.
But what it does have, and the screenplay has got to be talked about. It has anti-children, anti-commercialism, anti-big business, well ahead of its time, like a forerunner of things that might come later. We'll talk about it in Legacy.
Yep.
And it has it has a good cast. Daniel Hurley is really good. And Tom Atkins is fantastic.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, Tom Atkins is Tom Atkins.
Tom Atkins. I mean, even if this weren't a horror movie, this would not have been a consideration by the Academy that year. He's fine. He's serviceable. I don't think he's that great in the role, but
but it comes up in Legacy, Rich. It becomes a Legacy thing because this grumbly, surly kind of guy becomes his bread and butter. So they, Hill and Carpenter are interesting also. Basically, after Halloween 2, they get approached to do this, and they only agree to do it as long as Michael Myers is not the focus.
Yes.
And then Irwin Yablans and Mustafa Akkad produced the film. They give Halloween 3 a budget of $2.5 million. And then a lot of the stuff is like Don Post, cashing in with Don Post stuff. So like all of the masks, the very famous Silver Shamrock masks, excuse me, they didn't have a lot of money for stuff. Yeah, I'm a little under the weather. So basically, they asked Post, who had provided the shape mask, to work out a deal. So the Skeleton Witch masks are old Don Post Studios masks, but the Jack-o'-lantern was created specifically for Halloween 3.
And it's a great mask.
The masks are all great. They're amazing. But they shot in one town. Most of the filming was in one town. And the Silver Shamrock plant is actually a milk bottling plant, which is hilarious. God, the movie's a mess sometimes. There are pieces of the movie that are huge, chunky messes. But any other production notes that you came up with? The most interesting is the writing thing. The writing thing is, it dominates any of the writing about this.
Yeah,
and also Wallace.
For me, it's all it always begins with the script, and when you have bringing in somebody like Nigel Neal, who the Quatermass experiment, Quatermass in the Pit, those kind of stories dealt with eldritch horrors out of space. So the second the movie starts, and like within a couple of minutes, you hear a news report about a
Stonehenge. The blue stone's been stolen
from Stonehenge
9 weeks ago. Yeah,
and you're just like, well, that's going to factor into this, and indeed it does. Interestingly, I noticed too at the end when you have that big lab room, whatever, where the Stonehenge is on one side and the scientists are doing whatever they're doing in their undefined kind of role, that group of computer terminals, they're all in a circle, like Stonehenge themselves, like it's Stonehenge itself.
Well, yeah, and it's the whole production
callback to this other thing. I like how it links.
The whole production has a whole like technology mixed with old school stuff. Like even the pumpkin at the beginning of the movie, because all Halloween movies start with a pumpkin and the title. Even the pumpkin's done digitized on a computer, which is it's ridiculous. Like, but it's fun, and like if you can get over the bad taste that you're not going to see a guy in a William Shatner mask kill babysitters, it can be a pleasant, even disarming time. I would also say like some of the performances are better than you would expect. I would say the girl, I know Stacey Nelkin didn't go on to do a ton of stuff. She had a pretty decent career, but nothing crazy, right?
Looking at her IMDb now, she was in Bullets Over Broadway, which is decent.
A lot of TV, a lot of 80s TV.
Hunter,
A-Team, Fall Guy.
Yeah, she did the whole Stephen J. Canal thing at that point.
Yeah, and a couple other movies, but nothing major. And it's a shame because she's actually one of the better parts of the movie. Like she's like easy on the eyes, and she actually like delivers her lines better than Atkins. Let's go there. Dan O'Hurley is chewing on scenery.
God, he is
the moment he's so dripping with awfulness. And there's a whole other side with regard to the production. Where Wallace, I should preface this.
Well, let's just say Dan O'Hurley. If you're not familiar with him, you should be. He's done so many great things in genre film, He's in RoboCop and RoboCop 2. He was in The Last Starfighter.
He's Greg in The Last Starfighter.
Yeah, he's in Twin Peaks. He's fantastic in Twin Peaks. He was in an episode of Battlestar Galactica. One of the on Ice Planet Zero.
He's a very talented actor and a very familiar face, and he's been in a lot of stuff, and he's been a great actor most of his career. And just he's been in a lot of stuff, and you look at it and you just go, he gets to chew on a little bit of scenery here, and some of it is Stonehenge.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I think one of the other intriguing stories about the production is that they talked Wallace into directing. Basically, Wallace comes on to direct because he actually he had wanted nothing to do with Halloween 2. So when they got to Halloween 3 and they said it had nothing to do with Michael Myers, he's like, okay, I'm in. Although reading about Wallace and his life with Carpenter, it brings up all kinds of interesting stuff, because he had pitched in a sequel to Halloween so Halloween 2 takes place 5 minutes after the end of Halloween 1.
Yes.
Wallace, who was very tight with Carpenter and Hill at the time, pitched an idea of Laurie Strode going to college and Michael showing up on a college campus, which, if you're paying attention, is what becomes Halloween H2O, which he directs 20 years later, which is kind of funny.
Sometimes you just have to wait on directing that good idea you have.
Well, and actually, that's one of the pinnacle Halloween movies. There are pinnacle sequels in the franchise, and H2O at that summer when that movie hit, gangbusters, crazy. That was one of the more packed theaters I've ever been in my life, and everybody was falling on everything that was happening. So, I mean, production though, it goes well, right? I mean, they get exactly what they want, except with the fighting about what's happening on screen. They do that small thing, but the story about a British science fiction writer who didn't want to make a typical Halloween movie and put all this wacky kind of Invasion of the Body Snatchers meets Doctor Who meets Hammer Films meets George Romero's Season of the Witch, which, by the way, is also one of the reasons it's titled Season of the Witch, is because Wallace is a big fan of Romero's movie. It's crazy. Now Atkins gets the role because he was in The Fog and Escape from New York and had a series of small roles on Aereo, The Rockford Files, Lou Grant. And then he enjoys this role so much, we'll talk about it in Legacy. Okay. Sorry, I'm a little bit coffee tonight, folks. Forgive me on that.
You're Pam Grier?
I am. Oh, wow.
A little bit coffee?
A little bit coffee. So the box office happens. It does well its opening weekend against this movie, this little movie that, oddly enough, Rich, we are doing next week. First Blood. So yes. A little bit of a teaser. We're doing First Blood. It opens against First Blood. Now, Halloween 2 did very well against a PG-related movie when it came out. But Halloween 3 goes up against First Blood in its opening weekend. And it doesn't get crushed, but it loses a lot of its audience to First Blood.
Yeah, right? You're dealing with two R-rated films. R-rated films, just by their nature, have a less of an audience, a less potential audience to buy tickets. So even in the 80s, when they were a lot more lax about that kind of stuff. So yeah, it seems like a weird choice to actually open up two R-rated films the same weekend.
I don't think Orion knew First Blood was going to be a hit. I think First Blood, when we talk about it next week, and believe me, you need to hear about that. Nobody thought First Blood was going to do well. But Season of the Witch comes out. It it doesn't do great opening weekend. It kind of just keeps its head above water against First Blood, even though it's it's released on October 22nd. It grosses 6.33 million. It's 44% of its total gross. Ends up grossing $14.4 million, which adjusted for inflation right now is 44 million. So actually, kind of like the receipts for Halloween Ends, which is interesting to me in a weird kind of like wrapping up kind of way. And it kind of dies. It opens in 1,297 theaters.
Mm.
It only plays an average of 3 weeks in those theaters. And this 82 is a year where we're talking about movies playing for months on end. So Halloween comes in October 22nd. 3 weeks later, it'll be out of theaters and moving along and headed to VHS, which is fascinating to me. It's but it is how Halloween movies go. They come out, and what has happened in recent times is that Halloween horror films are released earlier in the month so that they'll last until October, until the Halloween swell ends, and then they'll kind of play until it's over, and then they're gone. Like Halloween Ends is still playing in theaters; it won't be there next week or this week when we finish up. All those screens will get absorbed into something else. But the box office is for a Halloween film, it's the lowest grossing Halloween film ever. At the time, and I just,
which I mean, it's not a surprise. It didn't do well with the critics. Fans were disappointed that it wasn't a Mike Myers stabbity stab movie.
I like stabbity stab.
I didn't mean that. Well, okay, maybe I meant that a little derisively, but you know what I'm saying. It. No one wanted to plug into what the movie was actually trying to do, I think.
And that's a problem. And I think the interesting side note here is this is one of those rare titles. 44% of the business on opening weekend. That is a normal for a horror film. But there was no repeat business.
No, this movie had no legs, as it were, and
it dies.
It died quickly, which again, for its faults, I think it's a shame because it's doing something new and interesting, and I think part of the reason we talk about the legacy and stuff is what would horror have looked like if it had been more successful and they didn't go back to Micheal Myers again for Halloween 4, 5, 6, 7.
If the anthology concept works, like I don't know, Cabinet of Curiosities or
exactly
or Tales from the Crypt or Creep Show or any number of things. Christ. But yeah, so the box office doesn't do well. It kind of is mediocre. It's low for a Halloween movie. And then the critics have at it, Rich.
Oh boy, do they!
And you look at things and you go, but this is where it gets interesting. Also, critical response then and now. The critics were harsh. They're harsh. They definitely did not get what Wallace was putting down. Vincent Canby had a great quote. Halloween 3 manages the not easy feat of being anti-children, anti-capitalism, anti-television, and anti-Irish all at the same time. But he was one of the few people who liked the movie. He was probably as good as any cheerful ghoul could ask for.
Yeah.
Ebert, of course. Ebert was not good. Oh my God, Ebert. But he loved Elkin.
And then Jason Paul Collum over at Cinefantastique, which is, one of the great magazines of the 80s for genre stuff. Even he was kind of like, man, not so good here, folks. He called it deeply flawed. He
hopelessly jumbled.
Yes, and he kind of mocked the idea about stealing a chunk of Stonehenge and shipping it across the Atlantic. Was kind of a bad idea. And he rightfully notes, if this is a national broadcast that's going to trigger the device in the masks and turn kids into piles of snakes and bugs, there's 4 time zones in the U.S. How is this going to work?
Right, and the movie makes the effort of showing you all the time zones at the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like
As
it
if
makes
it's all
like
happening at the same time.
yes, and it's one of the flaws of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's not being able to stick the landing. It also like, why is everybody getting replaced by androids? Like it never answers those questions.
Yeah, the
It just
Android thing seems separate from the turn kids into a pile of bugs thing.
well
And
I think that also I was reading stems from a Wallace idea about a corporate horror film where 2 companies are warring. I don't know what the title of the script is, but basically Wallace talks about how he had an idea about the idea of corporate drones of two companies fighting and having like guys in gray suits who were not actually human. Could have been demons. I don't know what the hook was, but there were 2 corporate entities fighting over consumers, and basically they were going to war as corporate drones kind of stuff.
so it's
And he
how to
was
succeed in business without really trying meets
well, it's
Stepford Wives.
how to succeed in business without really dying is more what it is.
Title.
Touche.
Yes. But
But yeah, so it's also a concept that he tried to do. So
mhm.
it's another idea, but he's like, I love that I got it in, right? I love that I got the guys in suits with gloves. And the funny thing is, they're always wiping off the gloves. I always thought the
Mhm.
point of gloves was to not worry about what was getting on the gloves. Like
That's worrying.
it's a weird thing in the movie. Like every time somebody does something stupid with the gloves, they wipe them off. Um, let's see. Well, let's see what we got. Ken writes, remove 3 of the Halloween franchise, and it's a good standalone flick. Expectations were way too high being in the franchise. Yeah, that's basically it. That's a touche. It's also
Go ahead.
it's also a weird, wonky movie. Like
Let me
it's
posit something though.
good.
If the horror movie that was going to be on TV that they're getting all the kids to tune in, that Silver Shamrock is trying to get all the kids to tune in to watch while wearing their masks because that's how kids watch TV.
I
If it
did when
was
I was a kid.
anything else other than the original Halloween movie, which we see clips of, Laurie walking and everything.
At the
If it was,
bar, yeah.
yeah, because
Because
once you
everybody
do that,
watches Halloween at the bar.
Michael Myers is fictional in this film's reality. But if you don't say that, you could always say, well, maybe Michael Myers and that mask was the first Silver Shamrock test run, and it went out of control, and that's why he went off and did what he did. You could almost kind of like
You're giving it way
glance
too much credit.
something off of this movie to keep yours. If and that was something I was thinking about as I was watching. I was like, they could
They
have maybe
missed it.
just
They missed it.
a little bit. Yeah, but that's not
Well,
what they wanted to were interested in, and no one even thought to kind of like retcon that idea in any of the movies going forward either.
like this, it's really funny. And then the future movies, these last few movies, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends, the
Mm-hmm.
Silver Shamrock masks are real. So,
Yeah,
like, because he kills a bunch of kids in the park in Halloween Kills. They're all wearing the masks, and so if you're a Halloween fan, it's like holy shit, and like you can even hear people singing in the movie. Like the Silver Shamrock theme is there, which is always there. So the critical response is not great. I will say that over the course of time, which is kind of nice. it's found its place. It found its place as being this wonky anti-capitalism, anti-kids, anti-big business. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's really funny. It incorporates a lot of like the crazy side of business and capitalism. Daniel Hurley's line, it's my favorite line in the movie where he's talking and he's like, "You guys for years have thought that Halloween is just putting masks on your kids and having them beg for candy." It's kind of great. And the anti kid stuff, he's so awful to the children in this. Like, there's a one child in the movie. I mean, he kills him eventually, but he's so like just so sickeningly cloying to him. Like, oh, little buddy, and he's just like, oh. But I don't hate the movie. I think when I first saw it, I hated it. But as it's progressed on me, it's a swing for the fences that misses, and it's okay when you miss when you swing for the fences. You
Mm-hmm.
might it's a foul tip. It's like it's so close. We're in World Series time. Um, but it has interesting concepts. It has weird things going on. It has the Elkin performance, which is really good. She's one of the prettiest women of '80s horror films
Oh, I would definitely agree with you there.
by far. And Hurley's a great villain. Atkins isn't great, but he's like he gets his armor, like he gets what he's gonna be in all these other movies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think it's a failure in the sense that you have to know what your audience is expecting, and
Mm-hmm.
the moment you slap Halloween on it, you got to expect something.
I don't know. I think they might have still been early enough in the history of the overall franchise that they felt that they could do that swerve. They're like, okay, we gave you 2 Michael Myers stories. Now we're going to go and give you something else, but it's still going to have that kind of same Halloweeny vibe. And I think maybe, they were feeling their oats maybe a little too much, but I don't think necessarily it
Well,
was a bad decision to go that way.
right, and
Uh,
it also it helps the franchise in the long run because it sets up Myers' return in four, and that becomes a big hit. You know what I
mhm.
mean? Like it's a weird thing that the heart wants what the heart wants. But overall, like the gore is a little bit weird, the story is a little bit weird, and it's not something we normally get. So now, 40 years after the fact, we sit back and we go, I'm looking for original. I'm looking for stuff I haven't seen. And Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is like, it's so uniquely original, so British, even though it's an American film. It has so much British stuff going on. I like the weird hatred of the Irish in the film is just bizarre to me. The weird hatred of the working class. Like he won't give a guy a job, but he makes a bunch of robots to do work. So, and he's like a weird toy maker. So it's this weird whole side thing. And like the guy who sells the most masks gets butchered first. It's completely anti-capitalism, which is great. Um,
Let me ask you a question about that whole robot thing, though.
the robot
Um,
thing's bizarre.
yeah, it seems to come in out of left field. I mean, he seems very much I'm trying to evoke these mystical ancient gods, and I'm going to do this in ancient magical rite. But I also
Using
got some science
technology.
fiction robots here. Are those robots entirely original, or are they like hollowed out human beings? Because obviously, spoilers here for the last 15 minutes of the movie. Um, what happens with Ellie is um,
Wow, you're giving away?
Tom Atkins runs off with who he thinks is Ellie, but it turns out to be it's a robot Ellie. So did they did they kill the real Ellie and then skin her and slap that onto a robot chassis, or did they did they
I
create a
think it's
whole robot Ellie and the real Ellie was still alive in the building that then
somewhere.
caught fire, burned and
Yeah. Well,
died?
I never looked at the robots as being human.
Mm-hmm.
I never looked at
But
them as being hollowed out. I mean, you could.
did
I
they
always.
have to build Ellie to make robot Ellie? And I don't think the movie gives us an answer or gives us even any
Oh, there
clue
are
as
no.
to possible.
there are no answers. Like that. Like I'll give you an example. I think the robot is the key robot in the film is the robot that's knitting, that's sewing.
Mhm.
That's the key robot in the film. It was like something that was at his plant, and it had inner workings, and it did like a specific job. And I think he took that and extrapolated it out.
Mhm.
Because remember, Atkins, he's talking to the woman. He's talking to an old woman who looks like she's out of a fucking Whistler painting. By the way, just so we're clear, I don't know why you're talking to her. She looks creepy. And I think that's where it comes from. I don't think it's something where they're trying to. I think they just make a suit that looks like her. I don't like. She might have died. I don't know where she died, but they
Mhm.
don't actually explain that. So that's one of
Yeah.
the failings of the movie.
Yeah, so it doesn't really sell the horror that he's being attacked by a robot Ellie as much as it could. It's like, oh, I
Well, yeah,
grabbed the wrong person and I grabbed the robot instead, and now the robot's
that
arm's ripped off, but I'm
right,
trying to get
and that
you know.
last 10 minutes, is just a dry run to try to stop the broadcast, which is one of the greatest things about this movie and one of the best things. And again, I'm going to just spoiler. You've already done one. You've ruined the Elliot thing, so I'm going to ruin something else. The ending is completely nihilistic. The ending is wonderfully. We can't stop everything. We
Whoops,
can only
dead kids.
dead kids on one channel. Also, I love the fact that we're watching a movie that only has 3 channels, Rich. Also, no internet. Also, no what. This movie made
Cell
today, Rich, you could remake this, and I don't talk about remaking things often, but tell me you don't have a place where you could make a viable. Well, let's fuck it. Let's jump. Let's jump.
phones. Booyah.
I'm
Right
going
to
right to
legacy
it. Tell
film
me you
franchise.
couldn't make a viable sequel, reboot, sequel, rebootquel, whatever you want to call it, where the Silver Shamrock thing is part of the internet. How much more damaging would the Dan Hurley character be if he was, I don't know, a guy who paid $45 billion for a website? Um,
And didn't
you
have
know,
jack all knowledge about how it actually runs and
and
works.
doesn't have any idea how it runs. Fires everybody who gets in there that ran it
Knows how to write,
first
knows
day.
how it works.
And 10 minutes into his tenure, decides he's gonna uh, print a fallacious argument immediately from one of the
Mm.
worst criminal organization, like one of the worst purveyors of lying filth ever. But yeah, I mean, the legacy of this is also that um, a couple legacies. That's part of the legacy, right? The idea that this could be a viable reboot. You could easily see what's happening on with Chucky on USA, or what happened with The Purge on USA.
Mm-hmm.
A season of the witch show that deals in occult horror, like Lovecraftian horror, with fused with technology, that we're the suck hole we're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Could be genius. It could be.
Yeah, I think it's like what I said up top. There's a lot of interesting ideas in this movie that unfortunately, it doesn't gel. But I would love to see somebody take another whack at some of these things, and
Well, and that's an interesting thing. Like, I was thinking about it today. I'm like, there's only 3 channels at the end of the movie, right? That he's trying to stop. Can you imagine trying to stop it now, or like an infomercial at 3
how
in
do
the
you
morning, or at how do you stop it? Like, and that would be a
who do you,
fascinating. That
who
would
do
be a
you call to
fascinating.
turn off the website?
Yes, it would be great. I actually think it's something that's
Mm-hmm.
definitely thing. Now, other legacy pieces. Of course, the one legacy for this movie that causes a franchise viability issue is it forces Mustafa Akkad and Yoblins to only make Michael Myers Halloween movies. If it has Halloween on it, it's going to have Michael Myers in it. Whether it
Yep.
fits or not, whatever crazy concept we've come up with him for this movie, whatever. 4, fine. 5, borderline bad. 6, the death of Donald Pleasance on screen and in real life. Like, it's just brutal to watch. And so the scaredness of the filmmakers to try anything different, to try an anthology, to try any kind of concept other than Michael Myers killing people with a butcher knife goes out the window when this movie fails. And its legacy, but an interesting legacy because it's been revived. Like, I think I read a lot of interesting articles about Wallace, the director of the film, Tommy Lee Wallace, going to all these conventions where people have silver Shamrock buttons and they sing the ditty to them, and their shirts and Etsy and all, like, so it's somebody somewhere loved it. They just didn't love it in the moment, and it wasn't enough to keep going with weird ideas for the Halloween franchise. Forced it back into a box. Other legacies, I mean, why do all the guys wear the same outfits? They're very Agent Smith, aren't they? All the robots are very Agent Smith.
Yes. Yes.
You know the Wachowskis at some point saw Halloween 3.
I don't know if they're directly pulling from Halloween 3. I think you always have that whole idea of the Men in Black, the shadowy government operatives, and Agent Smith and here are both playing with that idea.
Okay. I was looking at things, like I was trying to, some people have seen some things. Like, I think the wonky nature of the movie, like all over the place, the Stonehenge stuff, the occult horror. The people that made Garth Marenghi's show.
Dark Place. Oh, God. Matt Holness has a new Garth Marenghi novel coming out this week.
I know.
Trilogy of Terror, and I just need to get that shipped over from England because I love Dark Place. I love the kind of sequel series, Dean Lerner's Man to Man, which is kind of like a Playboy After Dark talk show where Richard Adewade's character of Dean Lerner interviews people, and every week it's a different character from Matt Holness, and it's wonderful. I'm not sure if that's on Amazon as well, but if folks out there haven't watched Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, but you like good horror, you like schlocky horror,
it's fun.
Horror picture show. It's a lot of fun, and it definitely rewards on repeated viewings because you start looking at little in teeny tiny microscopic sized jokes that will give you the biggest gut laugh. Whether it's just like an insert shot of somebody walks by in the main shot of the scene, and then there's an insert shot and of the floor, and the person walking by is in like women's shoes, but in the wide shot it's a man walking by. Just really oddly bad. It's just like a lot of fake bad production value that is hilarious. Oh, so good. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I that was a gift. That was my gift to you.
I love that show.
So the other legacy stuff, like the merchandising that's been put around this movie, we just recently had the masks put out by Don Post. NECA made a bunch of action figures based on the Pumpkin, the Witch, and the Skull, which released in March of 2020. It did very well on VHS, right? It also got re-released from MC Universal, then eventually went to Good Times on video in '96. And then Good Times distributed the DVDs. Universal got it back. So there was kind of like fighting about it. And they eventually they just released an ultra high def Blu-ray by Shout Scream Factory. So the idea that this movie does have a legacy, like there have been other horror films that have used it. Used the sequences. The Guest is one of them. Again, the Halloween Kills had trick or treaters. It is an incredible legacy with regards to this movie, and it is one of those legacies where one of my favorite things about the legacy of this movie is that you can fight about it. It is one of the great things where you're gonna have some people that utterly hate it, and then you can sway people over. The movie's batshit insane. There's nothing normal about it in any way, shape, or form. And I just think that's one of the reasons I love it. I love the idea that it doesn't contort any logical, like Tom Atkins, is what he is now. That's another piece of legacy. Tom Atkins plays the hero here. He loves playing the hero so much in this movie. He talks his way into a bunch of other movies. Um, and basically when he was interviewed for this movie, I think he was talking to Fangoria. I wouldn't mind making a whole career of being in just horror movies. Now, when you couple that particular statement, right? Tom Atkins goes on to, ready? He goes on to star in Night of the Creeps. He also stars in Lethal Weapon. He's in Maniac Cop, Two Evil Eyes. He's in, he My Bloody Valentine 3D. He becomes kind of the go-to, and Night of the Creeps is the key one, right? Directed by Fred Decker. He becomes the grumbly, drunk, surly, anti-machismo, um, cop slash hero. That's not really a hero. He's kind of just like grumbly and angry and old and bitter and fun. This movie gets him on that page, and then he never really leaves that page. He's in everything he's in. He's usually the grumbly old police captain, or the grumbly old sergeant, or the grumbly and he's always drunk, and so this movie gives us the Tom Atkins legacy that he would go back to again and again and again, which is great because it's a great legacy. Because Night of the Creeps is phenomenal, and he's great in it.
Dude got a career out of this. Dan O'Hurley, I think, he was gonna have a great career no matter what, if he did this movie or not. Not too
But he
many
gets
other
cred.
people.
He gets street cred out of this movie.
Not too many other people in the cast do a lot of other things or have much of a longevity in their careers. But, like we said, this is still some really good work from Stacey Nelkin, as Ellie.
And you recognize Nancy Kyes, Nancy Kyes, as Linda Chalice. The wife is actually one of the girls from the original Halloween. Also, if you pay really close attention, there's a curfew in the middle of the movie, a curfew for the town where all the androids live. I don't know why the fuck they need a curfew if it's a bunch of androids. I don't get it.
I don't understand how there's a curfew and then Tom Atkins goes out to the liquor store a couple of hours later and it's open.
Well, not only that, he goes out to the liquor store, it's open. The drifter's still hanging out. For a curfew, it's one of the worst curfews ever. But the person who tells you what time it is and that the curfew is starting, somebody brings their cat in, it's ridiculous, is Jamie Lee Curtis. Also, when Tom Atkins tries to make a phone call later in the little wacky town, which is right out of fucking Wicker Man, right? Right out of the Wicker Man. She's making a phone call, and Jamie Lee Curtis is also the voice of the operator. So
yes,
you now know that. Congratulations. You've learned something on our show. That Jamie Lee Curtis is actually in Halloween 3. Who would have known? Ken writes, Halloween 78 became the number one horror movie right from the get-go and has stayed there. You can't really go up from there. Going to be some crap thrown in there somewhere. Yes, there is. I would the Halloween franchise is really it's an interesting franchise to me. It's probably my favorite horror franchise. Next to a couple things, but it's probably my favorite horror franchise. But it is Halloween 78 is so far above everything else. You're right. But and it's in the conversation. It's in the conversation with The Exorcist and The Shining and Rosemary's Baby and Night of the Living Dead and as the greatest horror film ever made. But Halloween 3 is not in that conversation at all. But it is a fun 80s horror film that if it wasn't called Halloween 3 wouldn't have made $14 million. That's another side note that you have to talk about, is that it wouldn't have made as much money had it not had the Halloween 3 on it. But the Halloween 3 also ends up being the reason it doesn't make more than $14 million also.
Yeah, it's a very
a
interesting
weird juxtaposition.
Yes. And I just like the fact that I think over time, as you get more removed from the initial shock, upset, sting of Michael Myers not being in this movie, I think horror fans and just film fans in general have come
see
to
it for what it is.
Yeah, soften their views on it a little bit and say,
it's
an admirable attempt for what it wants to do. I don't think it succeeds entirely, but I'm glad it's there trying to do what it's doing, because God bless its demented little heart.
Yeah, it's demented and fun and off the wall and bonkers, and it has the Silver Shamrock song that once you sing it, you can't get out of your head.
And it's killing off kids, which is usually generally a no-no in these kind of movies.
Yeah, Little Buddy doesn't last long. It doesn't go well for Little Buddy.
And the ending basically implies that any kid watching that
half a million to 1 million children all dead with their families stuck in a house. That would be a great sequel. Like the beginning, the cleanup mess of the people who didn't get the stations correct. That'd be fucking ridiculous.
Oh wow!
The 82 incident would be how I would write it in a screenplay. The 82 incident. But yeah, I mean, it is for what it has become. A side offshoot story. The funniest thing, and I can't talk about this enough. My favorite thing in the world when you're talking about Halloween movies, and you look up and you realize that it has its own timeline. Even though Halloween is in the movie, it's the only Halloween movie that isn't part of any of the timelines that the Halloween film franchise has established.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time you look at, anytime somebody puts a cool meme on the internet with all the Halloween timelines, Season of the Witch is always in the bottom right corner, all by its lonesome. Because nobody knows what the fuck to do with it, and it's beautiful, and it's weird, and it's it's got to decide. It's really funny. It's got a slasher vibe in the sense that you want to see the girl naked, but they go out of their way to make sure that she's not naked in the film, which is another weird side note, because she dives into a towel and then she gets into a blanket, and then the next time she comes out of the blanket, she's wearing full lingerie. It's weird.
It's time to towel off and pull a lacy frilly thing.
It is.
That small look. She wasn't having a lot of clothes in that small little travel bag of hers.
That's what I'm saying. She's just looking for her daddy. But yeah, and there's so many good stories. I can't encourage anybody more enough to go out and look for stories of what happened. And actually, Tom Wallace is writing a book. He has a book coming out in the next couple of years, I guess, with the 40th anniversary. Where is Michael Myers is the name? Like, where is Michael Myers? The Making of Halloween 3.
I would read that book.
I would read that book too, because I bet you it's hella interesting and all the stuff that he had to go through. Rich, if people want to not talk about Michael Myers and Halloween 3 and all this other stuff, where can they find you on any given week?
Oh, well, we already have kind of teased what we're doing next week, right?
Yeah, we're going to do that. Well, we're going to tease it again, but
okay.
Tell everybody where to find you.
Well, all my writing is currently at FILMBUFFonline.com. Hopefully over the next couple of days, I'll continue to have some more film reviews coming out. I have an interview with the director of Causeway, which is the new Jennifer Lawrence film that's coming out in a couple of weeks that I did. Saw a couple of great, I think I mentioned them really quickly last week. A couple of fun horror movies, Blood Relatives and Next Exit. Hoping to get reviews for them. I'm finishing off my review of The Whale, of All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, which is a fantastic documentary. All of that's at FilmBuffOnline.com. I'm hoping that now that my other podcast co-host Natasha Bogutsky, who joins me on the Big Picture podcast, has wrapped up the stage show, the play that she's been in, which was fantastic. I'm hoping that we can sit down soon and record a new episode of that. You can find links to all the past episodes, though, at filmbuffonline.com or at bigpicturepod.com or on your podcatcher of choice. And I'm still over on Twitter watching it all burn to the ground. And that's at
From the inside out.
Yes.
Inside out.
I think you almost need to stick around to watch what is happening with Twitter, because I think it's going to be very instructive and in many ways maybe historic even.
Yeah, we're just praying for an asteroid. Which up until yesterday nobody knew you cannot, like, that the sun blinds us from seeing asteroids. That was one of the stories that came out yesterday, is that there apparently are 3 95-kilometer asteroids that are within our belt of us and I think Pluto, and it's like they can't see them because of the glare from the sun. Who the fuck knew that? Anyway, you can find me JW the Movie Guy on Twitter, JW the Movie Guy on Facebook. Also, we have Loud Nerdy group, Loud Nerdy page, JW the Movie Guy page, and JW the Movie Guy on Twitter. We also, and it has to be brought up, if you go to Hearts of the Mystic Folk Square site, shop in the Indie Escape Network, Hearts of the Mystic Folk, there are a bunch of candles. Every show has a candle. Our candle is the best, though, because it is movie theater popcorn. So you can smell like popcorn and then make popcorn and then watch Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, or you can watch any of the shows that are on the Indie Escape Network. IIIL coming up on Friday. I think returning on Friday with whatever guest he has. You got CJ and Gabe and Tim whenever he comes up with what he's doing. All great things. And then next week, you can watch us discuss one of the great action films. I would say of all time. Like, it's in the conversation.
Oh, definitely.
I think in the recent rewatch, I love it more than I loved it. Like, I think when you're younger, you love Rambo First Blood Part 2 because it's jingoistic, it's crazy. He's blowing people up with arrows and shit, and it's just like he's killing people. He's like drenched in mud and slitting people's throats, and he's righting Vietnam wrongs and stuff. But First Blood is actually 93 minutes of just and really good acting, like a really good performance from Stallone. Brian Dennehy is really good. And Richard Crenna,
strictly as a dramatic piece, not just an action film, but as a dramatic film. And I think you can have much good to say about it. And that's what we'll do next week.
And Ken writes, Rambo is awesome. Never going to Stallone movie. Think you'll have a great dog. You'll have a good time. Actually, I would beg to differ. I think the screenplay for First Blood is one of his better screenplays. And then Luz, who's Luz? Luz Cabrales. Go Rich.
Sorry, I'm not wearing my Scranton Film t-shirt. She is one of the prime movers of the indie film movement up in Scranton, and she's amazing. Thank you so much. She actually was she helped work on that documentary about that championship season, which is that we'll be talking about next month on the show.
Nice.
If we can tease a little bit ahead of time.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we're doing a big that's a shot. Yeah, we're doing that championship season. We're both from the Scranton area. It's amazing. I can't imagine. Maybe we can have Liz to talk about. She did a documentary about the championship season.
She produced it. I need to talk to her. Actually, I was going to try to get the director.
Okay, I'm just we're an equal opportunity. We want as many people as possible.
Anybody wants to come on and talk about it.
Absolutely. But thank you for joining us tonight. By all means, keep watching the Escape Network. All the great people involved. We want to thank Joe Ridgely, Dave Madison, Brandon, Gabe, CJ, Tim, all of us. And thank you for joining us. Again, pick the best flavor, which of course is popcorn. Have a great night. Enjoy and have a great weekend.
See you next week.